It's very unethical. It's very dangerous for the horse. It's also dangerous. Couldn't call that an ethical training program if there's any use of flight or fear or stress in the training response. It couldn't be judged as an ethical training program. Hello everyone, we're continuing with this series of videos with horseman science and looking at how good horsemanship and science can get together and help us have a better understanding of our horse's behavior, understanding why problem behaviors happen, how we might be able to fix them appropriately, how we could have a more ethical form of equitation, and understanding things. If we know better, we can do better. And probably one of the things that we really need to understand about horses is the flight and fear response, and just how dramatic or how bad that is, how important it is to help the horse avoid any associated flight and fear responses. And also today we'll just talk a little bit about the dangers of flight and fear and what they might do to the horse, the kind of behaviors that they provoke. Now, there's the obvious ones, aren't there? When the horse is frightened, he can take off, or he can spin around, or do any of those obvious behaviors, the kind of the consequences of the fear. But sometimes people are using flight in their training and they're not actually aware that they're doing it. For example, some round pen exercises, people are trying to get the horses to find the comfort, but they're placing quite a lot of pressure on the horse and actually chasing the horse. And while you're chasing the horse, you're teaching the horse flight. Now, one of the most dangerous things about teaching the horse flight, or using fear or pain or anything that causes the horse to think he's in danger, the problems with that is that these are the things that the horse learns really, really quickly. If you were going to teach the horse to do a nice side pass or to make a nice dressage movement, you might have to get into the shaping of that, really shape that with lots of little steps, and take a fair bit of time about it. You know, some of these, taking a horse up to the Grand Prix level in dressage, you know, you're looking at around 10 years work. People are getting horses to Grand Prix at maybe 9 years of age, but, you know, most of them sort of 10, 12, 14 years old. So, you know, it takes years to get horses to that level. But when it comes to flight and fear, sometimes just one repetition, one practice of the flight and the fear, and it's in the brain and it goes in. And no doubt it's a survival mechanism, isn't it? If the horse goes to a spot in the river and a crocodile charges at the horse, if he manages to get away, he's not going to go back to that spot. His brain will say, okay, that spot, not just a little bit dangerous, but like deadly dangerous, don't go back there. And every time you walk your horse past that spot, not that you'd go walking your horse past crocodiles, but every time you walk your horse past that spot, you'll notice that the horse will tighten up a little bit and say, something happened here before and I remember it. You know, you have a horse get frightened of a letterbox or something, and then you get into a conflict with the horse has a bad panicky moment. And for years afterwards, every time the horse goes past that spot, this is the bad spot. This is a bad spot. Some bad things happened here before. And that's normal because it goes into part of the brain that's there to keep the horse alive. So it's just like a one-way track, one repetition, it's in. The horse's memory is unfortunately excellent. And that's why when we're getting rid of learned behaviors, we have a little bit of trouble sometimes, because we can't cause the horse to forget learned behaviors. The only thing we can do is put a layer of better conditioned response over the top and hope that poorly conditioned response, that thing that the horse should never have learned, try and cause it not to come back. But we know it's just under the surface. And some of these flight and fear things, the horse learns things that he really shouldn't learn, how to spin around, rear up, take off, avoid bit pressures, avoid the pressure of the reins, avoid the stop response. And when the horse has done these things, he's learned something that he really shouldn't have learned, unfortunately. Now, there's another thing that happens with any of the fixing of problems with horses, is that we need to be aware of it. There's something called spontaneous recuperation, and that means that a learned response can always come back if the horse is in an environment that's similar to that in which he learnt the behavior, or to the environment in which he had those fear responses. For example, a horse might pull back and have really big pullback problem, and we might teach the horse about a halter response. We might condition that as well as we can so the horse really understands pressure on the halter means feet go forward in order to remove that pressure. But if you get the horse in a similar situation to that in which he was when he had the big pullback problem, and that fear thing that can suddenly click in again. So it's normal that sometimes we think we've gotten rid of a problem behavior, and then sometimes for no apparent reason, and maybe years later, it suddenly comes back in an explosive form. It's a normal thing, so it's probably good to know about it and say, well, that old demon suddenly popped back again, so I'll just try and cover it up again, but I know he's always under there. You're not going to get the horse to forget. You can't take his memory away. A horse's memory is too good. If the horse's memory wasn't good, he wouldn't have survived the last few million years. So they have a great memory, especially a survival mechanism memory, which means that if it's dangerous, if it could kill me, I don't need to repeat the exercise. Horses don't need to touch electric fences 5 times. They've done it, touched it, learned it, don't go back. It's dangerous, it hurts, I wouldn't do that again. So, and it's the same thing if people are using punishment with their horses in a situation. Imagine that the farrier suddenly got cranky with your horse and started whacking on your horse and hitting him with a rasp or something stupid like that. Well, the horse is going to remember that. The horse is not just going to go through that and it's not going to leave any trace. This is where it's so dangerous, is that the associative dangers are so important. The horse will make the association in this situation. When I hear the banging on the anvil, when I see that truck, when all these things come together, or if you're hot shoeing, when I smell the smoke coming off all those things will come together, and that horse will say, any of those things mean bad is going to happen. And now you've got a horse that's difficult to shoe. He wasn't, he learnt it, timing was bad, education was bad, and now he's become difficult. No horse is born difficult to shoe. They get difficult by people making mistakes. Difficult horses don't decide to be difficult, they become difficult through poor education. So the horse makes these associations, and now we've got a real problem. We can fix it, that's part of our job, but we need to be aware that it can come back, especially if there's a slight error in timing, or if one day the farrier starts to get cranky again. Well, it's all going to come back, it's not gone, and we just put a layer of condition, the better conditioned responses over the top, and it can come back again. So there's a lot of problems with flight and fear, one of them being spontaneous recuperation, but it's not the only one. There's also health problems for the horse. The immune system goes down, starts getting lots of things that you might not necessarily associate with fear and stress. Some horses get skin problems, and people say, oh, he's got a skin problem. Now, it could be just a skin problem. It's summer, and he's got some sort of summer itchy thing, and it could be just that. And it also can be sometimes called a stress-related skin problem, or a stress-related digestion problem, or and of course things like ulcers, stomach ulcers and things, are very highly related to stress. Now we can talk about what the horse should and shouldn't eat, and how he should eat lots of fiber 16-18 hours a day. But there's also that stress factor, and stressed horses get stomach ulcers. Stomach ulcers often give you a little heads up to say, watch out, there's a colic not far away, because often it's the same causes. He gets ulcers, the same stress causes colic, and a lot of colic is stress related. So stress could literally kill the horse. You'll often see that when a horse gets stressed. For example, you've got a difficult trailer load or something, he'll do more poops. So suddenly the horse is pooping a whole lot more, maybe 4 or 5 times an hour instead of much less often, and suddenly the poop level goes up. Now that means that the whole digestive system starts really accelerating, and this is another thing that happens with the stress, and often horses will lose condition. So the horse will lose condition, he'll start losing muscle, he'll get really tight. There's a lot of chemical reactions going on at the same time. So there's a lot of cortisol, and these things aren't the greatest chemicals to have flying around. They're all survival mechanisms. So the adrenaline or cortisol levels will go up. The horse will become tight, the head will go up, you're going to get some physical problems because the horse is going to spend a lot of time with the raised head and sometimes a lower back. There'll be muscle tension, which is not always a good thing. Sometimes you'll end up with getting muscle injuries. There's been studies on racehorses, for example, that show that a great percentage, about a third or something, of breakdowns happen after the whip's pulled out. Is the horse trying to go faster and then it blows, or is it the stress related? Who knows? But stress will cause injuries to become more likely to the horse. Other things, such as his jumping parabole, the way that the horse jumps, will be greatly changed by stress. Instead of going in a nice round jump over the jump, if the horse is stressed, he'll be dropping his back, lifting his head. It's a survival thing. When horses are stressed, their head goes up. Why? Need to look around. Can't look around with his head in the grass. When the stress happens, the head goes up, the muscles tighten, and the whole system clicks in, say, get ready, let's go. And when that system clicks in, when all those chemicals take off, it's going to take the horse 15, 20 minutes before things come back to anything close to normal. So, when it goes up, you can't just calm the horse down in 2 seconds. The whole chemical reaction takes off, and it takes a while for blood levels and things to get back to normal. So it's a pretty strong chemical reaction. Now, when the horse gets all tight and drops his back and stuff, as he jumps, he's not going to have that nice parabole over the jump, which means that it's actually dangerous. And on cross-country or fixed jumps, if your horse is jumping in flight response instead of in self-carriage, if he's carrying a nice canter, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, all is good. But if he's in flight response and fighting with the bit and the rider's skiing on his face, excuse me, the probability is that he'll be just shaving over the top of his jumps with his head up, and the possibility that the horse ends up doing a flip is greatly increased, and that is terribly dangerous. That kills people. So flight response is terribly dangerous for the rider. Horses can ignore aversive stimulus such as rain pressure, so you can pull on the horse's mouth, but if he's really scared, it all goes away. The horse is no longer clearly thinking. He's in panic mode, he's in survival mode. That's why horses, when they suddenly pull back in a trail or something and start smashing the place, you say, well, he's going to hurt himself. Why does he do that? He's not thinking clearly at that time. He's just trying to get away. He's in survival mode. There's no time when you're a wild zebra living out there on the Okavango Delta with lions and things. When an attack happens, there's no time for thinking clearly. Just move your feet. And this is what they do. Horses get frightened and their feet go fast. That's what happens. When fear happens, feet speed up. And this is why when we're looking at self-carriage, we need to be really sure that we can release the contact with the reins. We can have a no hands moment and see, do the feet speed up? Because if the feet are speeding up when I'm doing no hands, that means I'm in flight response. And if I'm in flight response and I'm training in flight response for 20, 40 minutes a day, I'm training my horse flight response, he's going to get very good at it, and I'm going to end up in a lot of trouble. So I need to be confirming regularly as I'm training my horse, am I in an absence of flight response? Because it's dangerous, and then horse ends up taking off, or the horse ends up jumping poorly and having a crash, ends up getting immune system problems, ends up getting sick, ulcers, colic, all those sorts of things. Other things that happen, the horse will often get aggressive. There's two things that'll happen. They'll get aggressive, or they'll get what we call apathy, is that they'll just sort of fade away and shut down. Learned helplessness could be another thing that happens. Horse gets very depressed, shuts down, and there's been lots of flight, lots of stress and all that, and the horse ends up just closing down. Lots of problems, no solutions. That doesn't mean he's become nice and quiet and he's feeling confident, because what will happen is he'll still lose condition, and he'll be in a pretty poor way. So using fear or stress or things like that, you can have horses that actually close down. You generally have a lot of horses, these sport horses over here, they probably won't do that. They'll explode and get very defensive, develop a lot of conflict behaviors, and sometimes become aggressive. And it can be what we call redirected aggression, which means even if it's not related to the situation within which the horse is stressed, he's still aggressive. So he's aggressive with other horses. You can't put him out in a paddock with other horses because he attacks them. So, he's a dominant horse. Well, or otherwise, he's a poorly educated horse, and he's been victim of so much stress and fear and other things that he's become aggressive. We've done experiments with dogs and rats and things. If they lose the control of their environment, some of them just shut down and become what we call apathetic here. They just close down and resign or just quit, shut down. And other horses become very aggressive, other rats and dogs and things, it's the same thing. They become aggressive. So sometimes aggression could be a sign. It's not the problem, isn't the problem. The problem is, why did he become aggressive? What's gone wrong in his life to cause that to happen? Rather than treat the symptom, try and find the cause. So you get redirected aggression, and some horses will even get aggressive with people. They're very annoyed horses. Their life has become very annoying, and they've become very annoyed, and now they're attacking, which is probably normal. If everything was going right, and if the horse was able to control his environment, and if all the responses were well conditioned, and he wasn't suffering from stress, and fear and fright wasn't used in his education, many of these problems wouldn't be happening. I've got a list of them here. I'll just make sure I've gone through them. So we've got all the fact that we're using too much flight in the training, and it becomes a learned behavior, which is pretty dangerous territory if you're teaching your horse flight response instead of teaching him correct impulsion. And correct impulsion would imply self-carriage, that I'm not pushing the horse forward all the time, but I'm not holding the horse back either. It's kind of like a cruise control on your car, that your horse is maintaining gait, he's maintaining rhythm. If I'm putting the horse in a 1-2 trot rhythm, he's maintaining the rhythm, and I'm not holding him back and I'm not pushing him forward. And if I'm not getting self-carriage, I might be either getting desensitizing the horse, so now he's not responding to the legs and I'm using the legs more and more, and therefore the horse is habituating to that leg pressure and he's getting used to it, and now it's getting worse and worse, and I'm doing more and more and the horse is doing less and less. So that's kind of cruel, because now you're using lots of pressure to get very little, whereas the goal was always to use very little pressure and get a lot. Or otherwise, I'm in flight response and I'm actually holding the horse back. So I'm trying to get the horse, don't go too fast, don't go too fast, don't go too fast. And there again is a dangerous area. It's very uncomfortable for the horse. So you'd be better to allow the horse to make the mistake, fix it, and then allow the horse to make the mistake, and then fix it until the horse was maintaining rhythm, maintaining gait, and maintaining his line, and you weren't maintaining the rhythm and the gait and the line, and even the physical form of the horse can be taught to the horse, so that you weren't maintaining the rhythm and the line and the attitude of the horse. You could be teaching the horse to maintain those things. The horse could learn to maintain certain responses instead of being maintained in certain responses. As we're going through this, then there's spontaneous recuperation. Problems come back, and so if we could avoid teaching the horse the wrong thing, that would be best. Muscular contractions, muscular problems, torn muscles, all sorts of stress-related injuries, aggression and redirected aggression, stereotypes, different types of neurosis, horses developing stereotypes, but also sometimes going as far as automutilation, where they start biting themselves and doing very weird things, kicking the walls and stuff like that. Learned helplessness, depression, let's call it. Conflict behaviors, lots of defenses coming from flight and stress. Digestive problems, and also the associated risks of all of that, which means, the horse that's taking off and the horse that's ending up having to find conflict behaviors such as bucking, such as rearing, in order to remove problems that he hasn't found a more appropriate solution for. So it's very unethical. It's very dangerous for the horse. It's also dangerous. Couldn't call that an ethical training program if there's any use of flight or fear or stress in the training response. It couldn't be judged as an ethical training program. Chasing the horse around, or even the way we're lunging our horses, is the horse learning to trot on the lunge and maintain the rhythm and the gait, or are we using the big long lunging whip to chase the horse to burn off some energy? Some people say, I chase him around for a while, 20 minutes or so to burn off some energy. You're actually just teaching the horse flight response for 20 minutes each time you do that, and it's going to go wrong. Trouble is coming. Things are going to go bad. Don't do that. Don't be going out there and thinking, oh, well, I'll burn off some energy. I'll chase him around for 20 minutes and then he'll be tired. He might be, but you're also driving him mad. You're teaching him to run away from you. And when you get on his back, the same thing might happen. People say, oh, he took off with me. No, he was trying to run away from you. You just happened to be sitting on his back, which made things kind of complicated. And once you weren't there anymore, things got a lot better for the horse. So make sure you're not teaching your horse to run away from you by chasing him, and you're not using flight response in your training, which would also imply the way you're using the whip or the way you're using your spurs. Am I teaching the horse flight? Am I going towards jumps and whipping the horse and teaching him flight towards the jumps? In which case, he'll start charging his jumps, and now I'm getting in all sorts of trouble, and I'm looking for a bigger bit, and everything's coming undone, and the horse is starting to hate jumping. So am I using flight or fear in my training? These are not things that are going to have a long-term, they're not what we call durable. They're not long-term things that can last over time. So if you were looking to have a long-term relationship with the horse and keep progressing in the long term, flight and fear, these would be things that you'd want to avoid for the horse, and also, of course, for your own safety, because flight and fear is learned very quickly and forgotten with a lot of difficulty. It's very difficult to forget flight and fear, but it's very fast to learn, and it doesn't take as many repetitions as maybe other learned responses might. So quite a few reasons there to think about why I would avoid using flight or fear or stress in the training of my horse, and how I would more appropriately condition responses so as to avoid those things. Something to think about, and we'll be back soon with another video.